Hello, everyone. Welcome to a special commentary podcast. I'm Captain Logan.
And I'm Steve Baxter.
And in anticipation of the new season of Daredevil, Steve and I are going to watch and chat about the first episode of Season 1, Into the Ring. And isn't it exciting, Steve, that when you have a series like this that goes direct to streaming, the first episode is not always called pilot anymore.
I know, I love that. Like, they actually give these shows intros and episode titles. Except maybe House of Cards.
Well, that's true, but no, it has episode titles.
It
has a formula of Chapter 1, Chapter 2. So, I say in anticipation of the new season, by the time a lot of you listen to this, that season is likely to already be up. I'm going to try to get this out before the new season drops, but as of this recording, we have like 48 hours. So, Steve and I thought it would be fun to talk about just this first episode and kind of immerse ourselves back in this world again. And if there's a lot of interest in this, if people really enjoy this, Steve and I might at some point try to take the time to come back and do more of these. I'm not going to promise that this is the beginning of a series.
Yeah, it's tough because every episode's like 50 minutes long. So it takes a lot of thought, and sometimes it's hard to like talk over the scenes.
Absolutely. So, I mean, I don't want to promise that, but if there's a lot of requests for it, we'll consider coming back maybe every now and again and doing some more of it. But, Steve, I think it would be cool to go in and sometimes just do, like, one episode of a thing like this, because it gives you time to really get your thoughts out.
Oh, yeah, definitely so.
And it's just fun to react to some of this stuff as it happens with the beginning of things. Like, I like to do this with Jessica Jones too.
Oh yeah, definitely. And the big plus I have on this, because I like Jessica Jones more, but I think the thing that Daredevil does better is that the world is so much more alive, and so it's just fun to react to the episodes.
I'm surprised to hear you say you like Jessica Jones more. I didn't know that.
Oh yeah, I love Jessica Jones. I think Jessica Jones is ultimately the better show, but even so, Daredevil's great.
Well, yeah, but you know what I always say. There's a difference between better and you like it more, and I'm just surprised to hear you say you like it more. I think is a thing I have not been able to say, and considering the dissertation you did on just the art for this show, I can only imagine what you would write for Jessica Jones.
People have been requesting it. I'm thinking about doing something on social epistemology and Jessica Jones. It might happen.
Okay, so nobody can see the whoosh going over my head right now. You can explain that to me later. Okay, Steve and I are going to talk about some Daredevil,
right.
And this is going to be so weird. I just thought of this, considering that you and Dan did the Daredevil Director's Cut with me just before this came out.
Oh, yeah, we did. I forgot about that.
Isn't it always weird looking at the you before a thing and the you after a thing?
Yeah, what did we... I don't remember what we said about that at all.
We said it just wasn't as good as we remembered it, and we hadn't even seen this yet.
Wow, I don't want to go back to that now. I used to like that.
I know. It hurts my feelings, because, I have been a defender of the Director's Cut forever, and I still think it's, of course, a way better movie in that it, tells a story.
It'll be weird to get to the end of this show where he says, I'm not the bad guy, and at that point he's just showing off about how much better it is.
I know, I couldn't even, but... A, I couldn't believe they had him say it, and B, I couldn't believe I was okay with it.
And how much better it works. Yes, anyway.
Yeah. So, if you want to watch the show with us, go to Netflix, because that's where it is. Has this dropped on DVD or Blu-ray yet? I want to say no.
No, as far as I can tell, no. I've been wanting to buy it forever, but not yet.
So have I, and you want special features for this bad, right?
Yeah, I mean, I want commentaries. Before House of Cards Season 2 came out, David Fincher did commentaries for the whole first season of that show. We haven't gotten anything like that for this.
I think I'm trying to remember if I listened to any of that. I don't think I did, but I've been hoping to see more of that for some of this stuff. Like, did they do that with Orange is the New Black at all?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I feel like they haven't done anything since that first season of House of Cards.
Which is weird because House of Cards already has DVDs and Blu-rays.
Yeah, I don't know what's up with that.
Okay. Well, anyway, so Netflix is the way to do that. So go to Netflix and rig up the first episode at timestamp 0 and get ready to press play whenever I say now. If you want to listen to it as a podcast instead, feel free to do that. And Steve and I will do our level best to provide a little bit of context for you as we are talking. Steve, here comes the Marvel logo. Are you ready, sir?
I'm set.
Everybody, please press play right now.
Actually, the Netflix logo.
Okay, hold on. I need you to give me a second because mine has frozen up.
Oh, okay. Let me rewind mine.
And you're right, it is the Netflix logo, but I had for some reason, mine was showing the Marvel logo.
Netflix likes to skip things every now and then. I don't know why they do that.
Okay, give me a second.
Sure.
I'll cut all this out.
No, just leave it in there. Just
okay.
Listen to us fumble around.
No, I mean, this is entertaining, and everybody's like, oh man, I hit play, come on!
And then they have to re-rig it and pause it and wait for us to get through that.
I want everyone to do exactly what I'm doing right now. So reset your browser. Timestamp 0, my face. Mine must have been at timestamp, like, 5. 5 seconds. Timestamp 5! Okay, are you ready, Steve?
I'm ready. I'm ready.
Everybody... Are you sure?
Yes.
Everybody, please press play.
We'll get it eventually.
Everybody, please press play right now.
All right, Netflix logo.
Yeah, there's the Netflix logo.
Marvel logo, which looks awesome as always.
Netflix seems really proud to have this property.
They do. They've really been touting it up. It became the most watched thing on Netflix pretty quickly.
How well did Jessica Jones do? I mean, I know they don't give us numbers for this stuff.
I don't know. I didn't hear the same sort of binge viewing experience as people had with Daredevil, but I heard it did fairly well. So I'm not sure off the top of my head.
So this is, and I won't spend the whole time comparing this to the movie, but there are some interesting comparisons, and one of them is right out the gate, we are starting with Origin and with his being a kid and getting superpowers in the first place. Now, of course, we don't do that framework thing where you see him in the suit first.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that we just open right up into the scene. There's no real context for it. We never dive into it later. It's all about just Matt goes blind, move forward.
Yeah.
And I love how this whole thing is shot, because I said that in my analysis where, like, this is the most colorful this show ever gets, except maybe the final scene of the last episode.
You know, I thought that was really interesting in your analysis, because I wouldn't have thought of it like that. You're saying that in comparing this to the rest of it after watching it all the way through, I mean, that's the most daylight you ever get.
Yeah, exactly. Except for the final thing in the last episode where they're all standing together. Like, it's...
If you looked at this by itself, though, you'd think, oh, this is a pretty muted color palette. Like, this reminds me a little bit of, of that movie, right? I mean, like, the color palette is really similar to what that movie looked like.
That's true. I guess part of it's even more jarring because you go right from there to the confessional where it's almost entirely dark.
Yeah.
And that adult Matt Murdock is always partially in shadow, at least for the old.
And that's a cool transition, too, because, of course, that's how he sees the world, sort of.
Yeah, exactly. Which, by the way, I will say this a lot more times, but Charlie Cox is perfect. He's so good. He
is as good of a choice for Daredevil as anybody Marvel has ever picked, including Robert Downey Jr.
I think he's better than Robert Downey Jr. as far as casting-wise goes. I think he's as good as Christopher Reeve's Superman level cast.
Well, and see, I have said that about Robert Downey, but what's unfair about that, of course, is that is somewhat of a reinvention, and this is not.
No, this is not. This is straight off the page Daredevil. When you go to the flashbacks at Columbia University, where he's got like the hair combed over a little bit more, he's right off the page Frank Miller Daredevil. He's so good, and I love this speech. I love everything he does in the church and with the priest. It's so well written.
Is that going to be this whole commentary? It's just, I love this thing,
probably,
and I love this thing, and then that thing? I like that okay, but then this thing, I love that thing.
I love the pattern on the confessional separating them.
Oh, come on, Steve! You put on your analytical hat and read into that.
Well,
what's it mean, sir? Well, let's see. We got they're diamonds with like some little squares inside the diamond. What? It's got to mean something.
So it's like a prison, but it's more hopeful than a prison. So maybe like Matt is confined to his religion, but there is a light at the end of the tunnel. Light being symbolized by the diamond shape of it.
Whoa, I couldn't have done that. That was, wow.
I don't even know if that means anything.
That was some masterful BSing, Steve.
Yeah, hey man, college. That's what it's about.
Well done. So, see, I miss college. I can't do that as well as you anymore. I've been there in a long time. I'm way too down to earth now. I miss the ethereal. I really do.
You say that, then you go back and write those essays.
Oh, I'd write one, and then I would shoot myself in the foot. Never again.
Yep. I love, by the way, we're going to say we love him over and over again, but like, He has two very particular scenes where he's basically crying. This is the first one. The other one's in episode 12 when he says, "I can't take another step," and it's beautiful. Like, you can overdo crying, you can underdo crying. He sells it perfectly. It's really hard to get that to work as well as he does.
Especially when you introduce your character with it.
Exactly.
Or at least you introduce your, adult version of your character. What do you think is ultimately the point of opening this with the quick origin with the kid? I mean, is it mostly just a functional thing, do you think?
I think
Or like, it's important that an audience that's not familiar with this character knows that Daredevil wasn't always blind. I mean, I think somewhat it's just that simple.
Well, I think it's functional, but I think at the same time it's important to remember just how much of that context defines who Matt Murdock is, not just in his loss of sight, but like his perception of the world. Like, he saves that old man. We never get any more context for it. The first thing we know about this character is that he's selfless, and then the entire series is about whether or not he should kill someone. And so
That's a good point.
That's a perfect juxtaposition. And then his dad being the first thing we see is his dad. And how much of this show is just about fathers and their relationship with him. So I think it's both thematically important but also functionally.
You're right. Yeah, it's setting a tone, but it's also establishing all that thematic stuff.
Yeah. Because this is one of those things where I don't think there's a single scene in this show you could cut.
I remember thinking that while I was watching it. And I should say real quick that it's been a while since I've lived with this material.
Yeah, that's fair. I
haven't sat down and written about it yet either.
It's pretty memorable though, I think. Like, it's hard to, like, some of these images are just burned in my brain after the first time I saw it. Like, this fight scene in particular I think is really good.
Oh, I completely agree with you. I'm just saying that there's some connections that you will have made that I haven't yet because you've spent more time with it.
No, that's fair. I mean, I did write that essay on it, so that's part of it. Were you jarred by the violence at all in this? At first?
I don't know if jarred is the right word. I was surprised that they decided to go as far as they did, but I think it does a good job of establishing right away what kind of show it is.
Okay,
jarred's not the right word because I wasn't like, oh my god, really? I like because they put you in that really deep dark place right away. I'll say this put me in such a mood.
Yeah.
That I always remember this as having come out in the fall, and it came out in April.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly the experience I had with it. It's such a fall show. But I've had several friends that watched this, and they had to, like, look away from the screen at several points. I never had that with the show, so I was just curious. Maybe I've just watched more violent things.
I looked away once or twice watching Jessica Jones.
Yeah, I did too there, but not because of blood.
I'm trying to remember if there was anything like... I think the car door thing I might have.
Car door. There's a scene in Rabbit in a Snowstorm where, like, he has a bone protruding from his hand and they drop a...
Oh my god, I don't know if that's unintentionally funny or not, but the guy sitting there with the nachos is hilarious.
It is. It's great.
I hadn't picked up on that before. He's so in shock that he's just holding the ship.
Matt is really brutal. Like, this is excessive and it's great. Like, I love how far gone sometimes Matt is in that costume.
Well, that's wonderful word choice, Steve. It's excessive, but it's not gratuitous.
Exactly. Yes.
There's a reason for this character going that far.
Yes. Obviously the intro is genius. I love everything about it. Same guys that did the intro for season 1 of True Detective.
I was really surprised that the logo is just the Daredevil logo.
Yeah, that was great. I didn't expect that either. Marvel's been good about that, though. Every time they announce a new movie, they do use the comic book logos.
Yeah, but this being a TV show, because of the track record we've had with TV shows, it was hard to imagine that it would be just, a direct translation of this character. I mean, obviously, It's its own thing. It's telling a story that has never exactly been told before with Daredevil. And it's become a cliche now to say off the page, but this is that.
Yeah. No, most certainly. I mean, I said this when I first watched it, but I think this first episode is like a perfect distillation of everything Daredevil. If you watch this episode and you like it, you could be a Daredevil fan easily.
Even before you watch the rest of it.
Yeah. Like, this is how, if I want to introduce people to this character, I'm just going to start showing them this first episode. And then from there, giving them Miller, Bendis, etc.
with the disclaimer, it gets really violent.
That's true, but I think that's a disclaimer with anyone that wants to read Daredevil, period.
Well, yeah, that's true. And that's what's nice about it is that, I mean, this is not a thing for kids. It's straight off the page Daredevil.
It is, and I mean, there's Daredevil stuff that's lighter. Mark Waid's is a lot lighter, violence-wise. Stanley did this. Stanley
violence-wise, but Wade still gets real dark.
He gets really dark, yeah, but I mean, there's not the same kind of gritty violence in his. So
not generally.
I don't think there's even that much blood in his run, but just like on a surface level of how much blood and gore there is, there's a lot more in Daredevil in general than there is in Mark Waid's run.
But I guess when I said that, I was a little bit less concerned with just, how much physical violence there is versus what it is that we're talking about.
That's fair, yeah. Because this is, it's a lot like Dark Knight in that way, right? Like, you don't need to see things to be terrified by them.
No, but it is somewhat more about why your vigilante is as violent as he is. It's more about that tactile thing than I think Batman is.
Yeah.
Mostly because Batman's got the gadgets to back him up, and Daredevil kind of just has his fist in a billy club.
Yeah, exactly.
Like,
that's the billy club until later, much later. So it's fun to, it's interesting to see his costume like tear and evolve and get more messy as he's fighting with just his fists. Like, there's a point where he's got like rope tied around his hand that he's punching people with.
I have to say, I wouldn't have thought this watching even this first episode, Steve. I'm gonna miss this costume.
I am too. I liked it a lot.
I like how functional and just thrown together it is. Thrown together is not fair, but I just mean that, like, he's not thinking about aesthetics, and of course he wouldn't, because A, he's blind, and B, that's not what it's about.
Yeah, no, exactly.
But it feels like, well, we've got, I mean, this isn't a bad thing. I mean, I like that we're getting, a very kind of comic book Daredevil costume, but at the same time, it doesn't suit him as well as the black one with the bandana does.
Yeah, and I mean, we'll have to see what kind of tonal shift there is between season 1 and 2 to maybe make that work more, but just right out of the gate, the way Charlie Cox is playing him, the things he's dealing with, that black costume just works.
That's why it's a good thing we're doing a season that's obviously introducing more of the mystical stuff, or at least I'm assuming we'll go there with the hand, because this season, I mean, like, I feel like this show makes Batman Begins look way more heightened.
Yes, agreed, definitely.
Like, we think of that as grounded Batman, and especially for the time it is, and I'm not knocking that, of course, but
yeah. This
doesn't feel like a comic book show right now.
No, it doesn't. I mean, it doesn't feel like anything different than what you'd watch on Fox at like 8 o'clock on weekdays. Like, it's got that kind of look to it.
Except for the artistry.
Yes, except for the artistry.
Except for, because I mean, it is very stylistic, but then those shows are also stylistic.
Yeah, I mean, Gotham is stylistic. I mean? No matter how bad that show gets, there is a style to it.
Oh goodness, yeah, it's distinct and it looks awesome, and yeah, I mean, I don't have one complaint about what that show looks like.
No, that show on mute is great.
I'm not saying the show isn't a comic book or doesn't look like or feel like a comic book show when you look at the Daredevil comics. I just mean that the Daredevil, when we're talking about Miller and then Bendis and stuff, that stuff is taking a comic book and making it look like a cinematic, gritty crime thriller that has throwbacks to pulp, but is as movie as it is anything.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, Miller,
and so this is regurgitating that
stuff. So this is neither here nor there. But after this show came out, like a week afterwards, because I'm into faction a lot, and I talk about this every now and then. I think I talked about it in the Daredevil commentary. But there was an article I read that built an entire wardrobe of suits based on what Charlie Cox wears in this show. And it was really fascinating. It's perfect for slim build guys, and it's interesting that because there is a tradition where like the collar buttons for suits just don't look good anymore. But then the show came out and it looks great now. So
when you said suits, I had a fraction of a second where I couldn't decide if you were talking about a suit you wear or a lawsuit.
No, like actual suits you wear. Like you see, he's got those buttons on his collar that other characters don't have as much, and you don't see those as much until like the late 2000s.
Yes, but you prefaced that with "I'm into this sort of law," and then Suits! And then I got confused. I knew for sure we weren't talking about cards.
No, not cards.
House of...
I like this Karen Page a lot. I think the actress does a
I
great job, and I like the
I like her
change they
too.
made to her, make her more of a journalist.
I like how plain she is.
Yep.
You know, I at least toward the beginning, like I like that she looks like just a person and she's not a supermodel, and yet later on, you gussy her up and she's gorgeous.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, this show does a really good job with all that kind of stuff. You know, like Foggy isn't a male model either. Like he's just a normal guy.
Well, and he can't be, and there's precedent for that, but he's also not like they didn't go overboard with like let's make him 300 pounds. They could have done that.
They could have, yeah. People complain about Foggy in this show, and maybe we'll talk about it as we get to later episodes. But I always liked him a lot. I thought he was great.
I never understood exactly what they were talking, or at least it's not a thing that I thought of while I was watching it. And then on a part of a second pass through, I never finished watching this all the way through a second time, but I was looking for it, and there were places where I was like, okay, I see what people are saying, but it didn't. It's not a thing I would have come up with on my own, and it never really bothered me. I've been wondering if some of what people are complaining about might become more of a problem in season 2.
Potentially. I mean, I don't know. I feel like every time, because the whole thing is that this is not Foggy's world at all, and parts where people think he's complaining too much, I think he's justified. But at the same time, Foggy in the comics complains a lot. That's just kind of his character. So I don't know. I guess we'll have to wait and see.
Well, yeah, and it's not fair to just say, well, he's like this in the comics, so it's fine, especially if you're talking about people that aren't familiar with the comic source material, and I'm sure most of those people weren't big Daredevil fans that said that.
But I
mean,
like even in the show's context, they established him as like this guy that doesn't like to get his hands dirty in the same way Matt does. So little things bug him, like the thing with the elevator and the bagels and stuff like that. Like
yeah, and he's also just a really uptight person.
Like
See, we don't like to write really uptight people unless they're like bad guys or supposed to be the irritating, bumbling friend that you're not supposed to like, but is like the comic relief. And I don't think that Foggy is supposed to be that. But uptight is hard to write and make a person likable. But that is a character type. Like people are.
Yeah.
There are plenty of people that are that way, so you can't not ever have that.
Yeah, exactly. And I think for the most part they get that really well. I guess we'll see if we finish this whole season and into season 2 whether or not that changes. It's also
again introducing a character crying.
It's interesting that we open both with Matt and Karen crying. Like they're both at some of their lowest lows in the opening and get stronger over the series. I think that's great. I like this scene a lot. I like Wesley. I think Wesley's awesome in this show. That actor's great, and he's got such a fun, dry sarcasm.
Also, anybody else want it? Well, okay, I say anybody else. Just Steve. Steve's the only other person that would want to do this. Steve, you're gonna love this. How badly do you want to sit down and do a comparison contrast piece between Wesley and Doug Stamper from House of Cards?
Oh, that's such a good idea.
Right?
I thought you were going to say Wesley and Foggy, and I was like, I was an inch away from doing that in my Daredevil video. But no, Wesley and Doug Stamper is perfect.
I keep wanting to say that Doug Stamper is like the quintessential henchman.
He is. He's great. Yeah.
But then so's this guy.
Yeah. No,
and they're both
serve that same
shows.
Yeah. No, they're fantastic, especially if you compare Frank to Kingpin.
Yeah, well, that's exactly what I'm saying. That you would do. Yeah, exactly. No, there's a paper in there. This guy is also. I mean, everybody is introduced really well in like showing us exactly what they're about and making this guy absolutely terrifying.
Yeah. And then again, just use of color in this show, the idea that color represents clarity, and it seems like bad things are the most clear in this show and everything else is murky and darker.
Oh, that's a great point. I didn't think of that.
I love that.
I mean, I have thought of it now. It just
No,
wasn't
I mean
mine.
that was
Dang.
the thing with the show. I mean, if you remember when we did the spoiler cast, all I could talk about was the art. So that's my
I
favorite thing
love,
about this.
baby. I love. Oh,
Do you know this actor from anywhere?
no.
Okay, neither do I. I was wondering if I just missed something or if he just went completely under our radar.
Are you looking him up?
I will now.
Oh, I just saw you doing something, and I thought maybe you were looking him up.
Oh no, I just spin in my chair. But
Uh,
let
that's
me look
creepy.
him up.
See, I love how this show, and of course, a lot of things are doing this now. So I mean, I don't want to give this just to this show, but I really like how right out the gate uh, we're using technology
Yes.
to intimidate and terrify. What they're doing right now, anyone could do, and that's frightening.
Yeah.
Like this is not some high tech setup that you have to have kingpin money in order to do. I mean, they need kingpin money in order to probably get away with the kidnapping and all that in the first place. But like, it's just a couple of tablets.
Yeah. So do you remember John Wick,
Yeah,
where the
see
kid
that?
had that big beefy friend that he'd hang out with that John killed like halfway through the movie?
Uh huh.
That's this guy. That's Wesley.
What?
That's Wesley.
Weird.
He's Victor in not Victor. Yeah, Victor. He's Victor in that movie.
Well, at
He
least he's
hasn't
not
done a
getting
lot, but
typecast.
he does lots of character roles.
At least he's not getting typecast.
No, at least not. Like that.
I,
He was
oh,
in White Collar. He was in Dollhouse. I haven't seen that show in forever.
I haven't seen that show in a long time either.
Um, yeah, his name is Toby Leonard Moore. Most of these actors I didn't know from a lot. Like I know Karen from True Blood. I know Charlie Cox from Stardust. But that's about it off the top of my head. I know Vincent D'Onofrio's from
Oh
Ghostbusters.
yeah,
No,
no,
Men in Black. Men in Black. Sorry.
Men in Black, yeah, and
And
lots
he's
of
in
other stuff.
Jurassic World.
He's in Jurassic World, and he completely disappears and doesn't seem like anything like the same person, and is
Yeah.
a really two-dimensional character in that. But whatever.
The rest
So
of these
we're
actors
20
I just
minutes.
don't know.
So we're 20 minutes in, and establishing very quickly just how well these writers know this character from the comics and love him and want to make sure that you do too and that you know what he's all about. I really don't mind Foggy's speech telling us exactly what Matt's relationship with women always is.
Yep. I like that. I think that's in his character to just point stuff
For
like that out.
some reason, it doesn't bother me. Like, I feel like it almost ought to.
Well, they do a good job of establishing that. Like Foggy repeats himself a lot in the series
Yeah.
just because he's that kind of person. So I never minded it. I'm sure it will come up more in season 2 when Elektra shows up.
Well, the thing is, usually that would be the kind of speech that you'd have like 5 or 6 episodes into a thing or more, where it's like, have you noticed your pattern with women? Like every time there's a beautiful woman involved, this is what you do. He's doing that 20 minutes in before we've seen any history with them. But what it establishes is how long they've known each other, and it helps to make us believe that these two guys that we've only seen in a show for 20 minutes have known each other that long and have this dynamic.
And I think that's where most of the levity comes from. Those two characters interacting with each other and joking with each other is some of the funniest bits of the show.
I guess that's why I like that, where it isn't just an exposition dump. It's there for character reasons.
Yeah. Also, after the show, Avocados at Law was everywhere, and that's all
Everywhere.
Foggy.
I like that his humor is a little subtler than the version in the movie.
Yeah, agreed. He's played by John Favreau in the movie, right?
Uh huh.
Yep.
And if Favreau plays him like a stand-up comic,
He does, yeah. No, it's a different,
and
sensibility with him.
I liked his version. I mean, it totally worked, but it was the big thing that kind of brought out the Ben Affleck-ness in that version of Matt Murdock, and I think that was part of why some people didn't like that version. Was just the banter was too like college comedy.
That's fair. I think that's still Daredevil-y enough because Mark Waid's humor is a little bit like Ben Affleck's, and so is some of the stuff around Frank Miller. But this is definitely more quintessential Daredevil, yeah. Um, before this show hit, and we were just thinking about other things Marvel wanted to do. I think we mentioned that we wanted a Daredevil movie, and apparently Joss Whedon fought for this show to be a movie.
As opposed to a show?
Yeah, as opposed to a show. He wanted Daredevil to have a movie as opposed to a TV show.
Boy, he was wrong.
He was, and I think he
I don't
admits it
say
later.
that very often, but man, he was wrong. Well, here's the thing. He wouldn't have had any reason to assume any more than we did. And this is the reason I said I was surprised that we got the logo and that it feels so comic at the beginning, is that if you're going to adapt this to a TV show, you have to use that Bendis long-form storytelling.
You have to, yeah.
It can't be every episode is a one-and-done thing, but we're kind of... I mean, you can have episodes that stand alone in the sense that, okay, it's a piece and it has an idea that's also building the... This show does that, but what I mean is it can't be formulaic. It can't be it can't be like the Legends of Tomorrow thing.
Yeah.
And it's gotta feel like you're reading issue 3 and then you're reading issue 4, as opposed to we need to hurry up and get an episode out to sell advertising. It can't feel like that. And when Joss Whedon fought for that, there's probably no reason he would. I mean, there's probably no way he expected this is what he would have gotten.
Yeah, and he's talked about that later. He's done a Q&A where he talks about the difference between television and movie now, and he thinks all the great creative blood's in television as opposed to film. And I think he's
blurring the line so hard. I don't know that there is a difference once you get off network.
Yeah, once you get off network, probably not.
I mean, there is. Don't get me wrong. Once again, I do really appreciate, look at something like, I mean, this is different because it wasn't streaming, but it is kind of part of all this. Look at something like a Breaking Bad and the episode where they're going after the Fly.
Yeah.
Like, that is a standalone thing. It's an episode that you could watch by itself if you wanted to, and it has a symbol, and it's all about one idea, and all of that, but it's also part of this greater whole. I like that we're not forgetting that these are still like okay, if we're not going to look at these as a piece separately at all, what is the point of breaking it up, right?
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
Besides just the convenience of, well, would you really want to press play and watch 13 hours of something?
Well,
would. Steve Baxi would.
I would, yeah. I'm going to do that with season 2. I did it with season 1. I did it with Jessica Jones. The other thing that Drew Goddard talks about with this show is that regardless of what you do with it, Marvel's going to throw money at a film, especially after the success of Avengers. And it's fundamentally a different thing to tone down a $200 million project than a bunch of individual like $5 to $50 million projects. And so it just naturally would look a little bit better than this show would, and that's not what they needed. They needed something that looks very different from the films.
It is harder to make a thing look as real and gritty when you throw too much money at it.
Exactly.
I mean, you wouldn't necessarily think that. You think, well, you just make it look like you want it to look, but minimalism really helps give you the tone you need for a thing like this.
Exactly.
All the way down to what sort of cameras you're using.
Yeah. How much space you have, how much light you have, all that. Like some of the best shots, I'm sure, just come from accents and not having the right equipment. That happens in TV all the time.
I maybe said this before, Steve. I wish Buffy Season 6 looked like Buffy Season 2.
I agree. Yeah.
I don't like that when it gets dark in the later Buffy seasons, it's polished enough now and modern in the early 2000s, method of TV and movie making that when it's dark, you don't have that grain in the footage.
Yeah.
No, that show lost something when it lost the grain in the footage. This show, grain in the black footage.
Yeah.
Not to the same degree, and of course some of that was unintentional and looks like a mistake, but it's okay that it looks like a mistake. It's that kind of show.
Yeah, the special effects work, the color design, the details in this is just fantastic. Like, there's a great video on the VFX breakdown of this show and where they artificially darkened things, where they added blood and stuff, and it's a lot of it's on a minimal budget, but then a lot of it is also just touching it up to make it feel as real as possible.
Yeah.
Because it's both not in our world and in it at the same time. It's weird. Like, I feel like I'm in a different universe watching this show, but it's a universe I could very easily visit.
And that you still, or at least I do, totally buy being in that same world with Captain America and Thor and all those guys. And it doesn't, it doesn't look like that world, but that's the point, right? Is that in the real world there are different worlds. You can look at Hell's Kitchen and Asgard and the time of World War II and all these different settings and time periods almost like different dimensions set in the same multiverse.
Yeah, exactly.
And the real world is that way. That's one of the things I've always enjoyed about, this is neither here nor there, but about like multiversal fiction is that as a metaphor for the different worlds that people live in and the different perceptions they have. That like you and I, Steve, have different worldviews because we're from different places, we have different backgrounds, we've had different experiences, we've accomplished different things, and so we both live in the same world, but we also live in two different worlds.
Yeah. No, exactly. And a lot of that, it's easy for some of that to bleed together. Sometimes it doesn't. Like when you go to Speak of the Devil and Matt fights the Hand Ninja, and it seamlessly goes into a more Marvel-esque thing, and then immediately goes back to its own world when you get to when you get to Nelson versus Murdoch, and they're just talking in the apartment. Which, by the way, the apartment is amazing. I love the apartment.
Steve, I don't want to sound hyperbolic when I say this, but this was one of the big things that hit me like a ton of bricks when I first watched this, and I'm gonna say that this was the most provocatively atmospheric and original thing I've seen in anything in probably a decade.
It's
just the look of this place, the purple. See, people always talk about how Daredevil's costume is red, but I've always thought it was purple, and this show agrees with me. It's purple.
No, I mean it's aesthetically brilliant. It reminds me a lot of Blade Runner. There's a lot of interesting modern art influence there. It's
Absolutely, yeah. A little bit of I don't know if I'd say German expressionism
probably not
so
German
much.
expressionism, but um,
No, because you don't have
I
the
mean,
angular stuff, but
yeah,
there's I don't know. I guess I'm thinking more like noir stuff. I was thinking of some silent film stuff, but I guess more
yeah, no,
like early not noir inspired, but something inspired noir.
in places it reminds me of like a Jackson Pollock. Um,
Okay.
so
See, I'm not an art guy. I try not to delve too much into that stuff because I don't want to pretend like I know something I don't know. I don't know much about
I don't know a lot about art, but I've been trying to
painting
learn
and
for the
stuff.
past couple of years, so it's
Well,
interesting.
you and that's more than I've done, Steve.
No, I like the lighting a lot. And you're right, it is
I'm
very
such a
noir.
fraud, Steve. I'm a comic reviewer and I don't know jack about art. Anyway, I'm sorry. What?
Um, Something about Daredevil comics that I don't think anyone pays enough attention to it or talks enough about because Andy Diggle has a bad Daredevil run. It didn't start that way though. It opened pretty well. But my issue with his run was always the feel was wrong. It always felt like artistically and directionally Daredevil knew where he was going a little bit too perfectly, just in the way he moved, in the way he was drawn, in the way he talked.
Oh,
And
interesting.
there's a weird like different layer of communication with Daredevil art where it has to be distinct enough from a typical superhero comic. And I don't know how to put that into words. It's just different. And this show gets that really right. Like it feels superhero and it doesn't feel superhero at the same time. I don't know if I'm making any sense, but Daredevil reads differently. That's all I can say about it. It just feels different.
It's so interesting because it's vigilante fiction before it's superhero, and with some characters there's a difference between vigilante and superhero, and with
Yeah.
some characters there you can make an argument that it is one or the other. Daredevil's one of those, right?
Yeah.
Where he's not the Punisher, and of course we're about to just straight up compare that on screen on purpose. But he's not the Punisher because he doesn't go out and just kill people. He's not that sort of a vigilante, but yet he is completely taking the law in his own hands, and he will delve out punishment in a way because there's a good reason we don't have police brutality, or at least we're not supposed to.
Yeah.
So just to your point, it's not revenge fiction. Well, sometimes it is,
It depends. Yeah. See, I don't know.
but
It's an
I guess what I'm saying is,
element.
do we even want to make a distinction between vigilante fiction and superhero fiction? Like,
I don't know.
okay,
I mean, because Batman is both sometimes. It just
he is, but
depends.
right, and both of those characters have an ideology and a set of rules and a line.
Yeah.
I mean, Daredevil in this is trying to decide if he shouldn't cross his line, but he does have one.
Yeah, and I mean, the show's all about defining it. So I mean, I don't know. It's tough. Like there are just some things you can't put into words. I think the feel of Daredevil is one of them.
I like that about it. And you know what? I have been trying. I love that you said that because ever since the show came out, I've been trying to articulate the very thing you're talking about. And I keep thinking, if only I was Steve Baxi and I knew my Daredevil better,
I mean,
I could do that. And Steve's like, I can't quite pin it either. But that's what's so cool about it, right?
yeah, exactly. I mean, like I've read everything Miller forward, literally everything
It's
Miller forward. And there's always
unclassifiable.
that element that I can't talk about.
So, Steve, you and I have dealt with this actor before.
Oh yeah, Owlsley.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Because of 24.
Yep, in 24, he's awesome.
He's a really good actor, and once again, he's not too typecast either,
No,
because he's an absolute horrible human being in this, and he's one of the more likable characters in 24.
Yeah, he is. He's in a lot of stuff too. Like I've seen him all over the place. His name is Wikipedia. Help me. It's Bob Gutton.
So, I'm sorry, what?
Bob Gutton. Gutton. I'm not sure how to pronounce that, but yeah.
He looks like a Bob.
Yeah, he does look like a Bob, doesn't he? He's got a Bob face.
He has a Bob face.
Yeah, no, he's in 24. He's in Sweeney Todd in a play, which is cool. Shawshank Redemption, obviously. Other things here that we've seen.
I love how sarcastic he is in this and how he just doesn't even take the Kingpin seriously.
Yeah, no, it's great.
Like, he sees him as, like, really unprofessional and, like, they don't have their act together. And, of course, Kingpin always has a plan and knows where he's going. And this guy is just not in the loop. And so it's his own insecurity. Like, well, because I don't know, the only way I can live with myself and deal with things is to assume that you're just doing stuff wrong.
Yeah, and he keeps that all the way through, even when he's in control by the end of the series when he tries to blackmail Kingpin. It's pretty great. I love his one-liner where he says, "Obviously, Nobu isn't cold."
Yeah,
that's fun.
It's a little sad that we didn't keep him alive long enough that he could put on an owl costume, but then in this show,
he's got a kid.
I mean, I realize that we do the costume stuff in Marvel, but you know, I just think that we're interpreting Daredevil in such a way where it's a more grounded thing, even in a universe that isn't entirely grounded, and it's okay. Like, it just wouldn't be quite appropriate for the setting and stuff, at least yet. But you can tell that we're more on our way toward that kind of stuff, maybe.
Well, yeah, we'll see how jarring, if even if it is jarring at all between season 1 and 2, whether there's a shift in tone or whether it's just an immediately different thing with the costume or not. Obviously, criminals will react to it differently.
Can I tell you that I am in no way expecting a total shift the way you're talking about it? I expect it to be a completely natural transition where there's an escalation through that season of more for this show, kind of, you know, wild and out there and supernatural and stuff, and it will maybe get to another tone, but I don't think between the seasons there'll be any sort of tonal shift.
I guess I'm thinking of it in Batman Begins Dark Knight terms, where like I feel like the next season's going to feel like Dark Knight as opposed to Batman Begins, where there's a shift. It doesn't feel jarring at all. You don't have to think about it, but there is something different about it. But we'll see. It will be out in 48 hours, like you said, so we'll see.
Well, part of the reason you have that tone shift with Dark Knight is just that suddenly you're shooting in an actual city instead of a big set you build.
Yeah, the world goes from orange to blue, so
it does look totally different, and you can tell from the trailers we don't have that.
That's true. That's fair. By the way, I do want to mention Rhino Ranger is in this show, and that's awesome.
What?
Yeah, that guy in the background, the Scar, the Russian dude.
Okay.
Yep, he is Power Rangers Rhino Ranger from Jungle Fury. Jungle Fury.
Oh. See, I didn't watch that because...
Oh, you didn't watch Jungle Fury? Jungle Fury's good. I like Jungle Fury.
a lot of those shows. I mean, I didn't watch anything after Dino Thunder, and I didn't watch anything before Dino Thunder either.
You need to
Past
watch SPD. SPD is great.
Space. Is it?
SPD is one of the best seasons.
I
Period.
don't know
Yeah.
that I've heard anyone else ever say that. Okay. Yes, we're talking about Power Rangers. Deal with it.
Hey, I mean, there's a Power Ranger actor in this show, and there's another Power Ranger on primetime TV with iZombie. So there's
We should watch iZombie and do this with the pilot for that, and just spend like half of that talking about her as a Power Ranger.
We should, because she's an RPM and she's great in that show. That's a good show too.
See, my and Steve's interests are real broad. You know, we can talk about a thing like this that's like really layered and has subtext.
Hey, Power Rangers has
Steve,
subtext. It just happens it's not very subtle about it.
Oh my god, I just don't even want to point out how much of a contradiction that is. That's wonderful. It's not subtle, but it's there. Well, no, that's true. You can have blatant subtext, I suppose.
You can, yeah. And I mean, Time Force is genius. I don't get any of
Subtext
that.
is simply something that is inherently an idea that is inherently there that nobody comes right out and says. It can be blatant.
Yeah.
That's when it gets, I mean, cliched subtext is blatant, where you're like, yeah, everyone's done that metaphor that way. We all know what we're talking about.
I'm looking at the Jungle Fury Rangers Wikipedia page. He's done really sporadic acting, and he goes to Daredevil like 4 years after doing nothing else. So that's interesting.
I wonder if he kept trying to get on things and just couldn't pass auditions.
Maybe. I don't know why not. He's really good, I think.
Yeah, he's great at standing there with a scar on his face.
I mean, he's got more stuff in the rest of the season. Like when you get.
Oh, does he? I forget.
Like when you get to Condemned, and he has that whole speech about right versus wrong, and
Wait, that guy got a speech?
He did. He got a whole episode just talking to Matt.
Well, I don't remember that. Oh, wait, that's who that is?
Yeah, that's Condemned.
That's that guy?
Yeah,
oh.
They're sitting in the Condemned building and just chatting, and it's great. And he volunteered.
Good job, Rhino Ranger. Yeah.
He's great. I love this fight, by the way. I love how brutal this one is, especially. Like the way the walls shake around them, so it feels like it's actual like paper and not a standing set.
That's a really good point, yeah, because it's obviously just, what is that? What do you call it? Is that stucco, or what do you call that? Like, what those walls are made out of?
I don't know carpentry. I don't.
You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. Just like plaster, whatever that is.
Yeah, it's another whatever. Anyway.
Kid who plays young Matt Murdock is fantastic.
He is.
Child actors are hit and miss. This guy's great.
You always have to be careful that you get as much of this stuff in that you think you really need to be there before the kid gets too old.
So can I ask you about a topical thing that might be a different thing? That might be a different discussion.
Yeah.
So a 7-year-old, I would not show Daredevil 2. But a 7-year-old can be in Daredevil.
Oh, yeah. Can we do a GNN on that one of these days?
Yeah, because I keep thinking about, like, I would not show a 7-year-old kid the Kingpin scene where he's like, keep kicking him, but a kid did that.
And I think about that with horror movies. I think about that with kids that say, like, really awful, vulgar things in movies.
There was a whole controversy about Chloe Grace Moretz doing that in Kick-Ass when that first
That's exactly what I was gonna mention that, Steve. I mean, Vince and I had a long conversation about that when that movie came out, and I don't think I ultimately really came down at I couldn't decide if it was okay or not, because the problem is your selfishness kind of gets in the way where you go, well, I want that scene. You're like, is it a necessary evil, or should we just avoid that and write around it? But then, where do you draw the line when you start letting that kind of morality get in the way of the art? But then that sounds like a horrible sentence.
It's tough, because I would consider some of the method acting stuff Jared Leto did with Suicide Squad pretty close to immoral, but it's for the sake of the art.
If he got a great performance out of somebody out of it, then can you kind of justify it? And then
it's scary.
And then you have to decide when ends and means. And can we do a video on this one of these days?
I'm up for it. I've been thinking about that a lot lately.
A lot of that movie is going to be. I mean, I'm sorry. A lot of that video is going to be me, him, and Han going, I don't know, but it's interesting to talk about.
It's interesting. It's the same thing as Nazi scientists torturing people to get information, but is that information then moral to use in other studies?
Yeah, it's just to a lesser degree because we're not doing that, you know.
No, but like it's the
Um,
same kind of ethical issue of like the way we get something necessarily put some sort of limitation on how we ought to use it.
well, I also think that it's somewhat in the same vein of sexual exploitation,
Yeah, exactly.
you know, where uh, like you put. Sorry, I'm just watching this incredible action
It's so good, yeah. In the rain too. It's
where
great.
you know we make women sex objects in things, and we try to make people think that no, we didn't really objectify them, we just put them in a movie or a commercial or whatever like that because it sells, but we treated them well. But then you just have people's word for it, and we know that's not always the case.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, a lot of the times
And
actresses have talked about that.
absolutely. And then and then you look at it with children and you're like, how do you make a kid comfortable doing that?
Exactly.
And then
So,
wouldn't you have to make a kid really uncomfortable to get a certain to get a certain performance out of him for a scene like that?
yeah,
Oh
like
boy,
that kid
Steve. I mean, that
sells
is the
it so
$60 million
well.
question. I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. What?
So I'm just saying, like the kid who plays young Kingpin, he understands that material. It seems like just from the acting. So either he is brilliant at faking things with no context, or he had to know the context.
Or they found a kid that tragically in real life related to that, and that is
Which I can,
scary to even fathom.
yeah, it's difficult. We talked over it getting into that issue, but I love in this show when people are fighting, they get tired. Because
Oh, that's a great point.
it's
Yeah.
great. People don't realize this, but when you get into fights, a fight lasting more than 30 seconds without someone getting tired is unrealistic. People get exhausted doing these things.
Yeah, and long action scenes, just because it's a dance, don't help. Video games don't help either. I
Yeah.
mean, that has really messed with our perception of what a person could accomplish in a single evening, let alone in a couple of minutes. But I'm just saying, we're so used to running around in an air quote realistic looking thing in a video game, punching the crap out of people. You couldn't do it that long. I'm not saying that it's bad that we have that, but it I think people forget that people are more limited than that.
Yeah, no, agreed. Um, it's certainly an interesting mess, and I like that we're getting more of that on TV at least. Like it seems like it seems like we're going for more realism stuff as far as violence goes, so that's always fun. Uh,
One of my favorite things about the show, and we did this to a degree also with Purple Man in Jessica Jones now, is that Kingpin has this looming presence, but you don't see him for like 3 episodes.
yeah, he doesn't show up in full until the end of Rabbit in a Snowstorm, which
And
is
so
great.
our introduction to him is as this larger than life, kind of godlike, like I said, looming presence. And then when you finally meet him, of course, he becomes as human as Matt Murdock, and arguably the most human character in the show.
And I'd still argue maybe Karen is that, but yeah, it's
Oh,
great when they do that with
okay, fair
Daredevil
enough.
comics all the time.
I guess what I mean is that he is as human as anybody else. That was hyperbolic, but I just mean that, like, to take a character like that who becomes what he
Yeah,
becomes, and is capable of the atrocities he does and can live with himself, and at the end decides that he's necessary evil, he's going to be the bad guy on purpose, that we actually buy that comes from a place, and that a human
yeah,
being
no,
could turn into that is incredible.
technically defined as. And some of the music we haven't talked too much about that, but this particular score I'm in love with. I play that all the time, just sitting around doing work. It's great.
Steve, you cut out for a second, and I didn't hear your point right before that.
What did I say right before that? About the fact that he's the fact that Kingpin is technically defined as a super villain, but he's so extremely human. Like just putting himself in
Thank
that
you.
category.
I didn't get that. We didn't get to hear you say that. I'm glad that you remembered it.
Yeah. um, Fogwell's Jim from the comics. That's great.
Is there any kind of correlation, or is it just a because I don't know this, or is it just a coincidence that he has a best friend named Foggy Nelson and he goes to a gym called Fogwell's Gym?
That's just a coincidence as far as I can tell. Um,
I wonder why that choice was made.
It's weird. I don't know why, but they're both comic book things and they're both coincidences. Um,
Okay. I'm just saying, that's weird.
this score is
Hold on,
great,
I
like I
gotta do
said.
it. Da-da-da-da! Da-da-da-da-da!
I love this montage. I love this show setting up its entire season with these final couple minutes.
We're living together, and still it's fair. Like, can you believe that we end this first episode with a Rocky montage? Like,
Yeah.
it's
And
not.
it
I mean,
works.
it's a Rocky montage if you had a guy that got shot in the head in the middle of a Rocky montage. Like if Rocky was more of a crime drama than it is, because of course there's
Yeah.
elements of that in Rocky.
Yeah, but it's nowhere near as dark at all.
No. I'm just saying the first movie,
Yeah.
especially, there are elements of crime drama
No, that's true. For the first two movies, I think are fairly more grounded than the rest of them ever
because
would be.
he's an enforcer.
Yeah. Yeah, and that comes up in the second one quite a bit. They kind of like skirt it by the end of it, but that's okay because it becomes a different thing by that point. Um,
The blind people working at the um
the heroin plant with
yeah,
Madame Gao.
thing is just like terrifying.
Yeah, it's terrifying. It's really smart, and it helps build this universe. Also, especially with the Steel Serpent thing and the Iron Fist connection. Um, I like Nobu's actor a lot. I don't know him from anything, but he's got such a great presence, and I don't know, he's great. Everything in the show is just great.
It's great.
It
We love it.
um that boxing montage, that's just so Daredevil. I love it. It's exactly what
Yeah.
you should do at the end of this episode. It's so Daredevil.
This has been out almost a year, and I still kind of can't get my mind around the fact that it exists.
I know, right? Like I've never seen an adaptation this perfect. Even though I like Jessica Jones more, I still think that this is the perfect adaptation.
Well, what pushes Jessica Jones over the top, maybe, and I still can't bring myself to say that I like it more, but I think that they're definitely on even footing. I think I might actually like that story more, but I think this is Daredevil. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, I mean,
but
Daredevil's always been my favorite character over Jessica
what
Jones. So.
maybe pushes that over the top is that from everything that you guys, you and Eric and people that have read that, because I haven't, that have read that have said, it like goes above and beyond the source
Yeah, it
material.
changes a
It's
lot.
in the way that Batman Begins and Dark Knight sometimes
Yeah,
took Batman things and did better things with them than had been done before.
yeah,
And
exactly.
this, I don't think you could necessarily say does that, but only because it's using so much of that same stuff.
Yeah, I think the difference is Jessica Jones is the perfect case for what an adaptation ought to be, and then Daredevil is just the perfect adaptation.
That's a great point. Yeah. Well, it helps that Daredevil has so much source material.
Exactly. Jessica Jones got a
You
very
could
limited
just
library.
you could just straight up do a story that had been done in comics in Daredevil, but then you have to update it in some way because unless you do a really recent one.
I mean, there's lots of stuff from Miller's era that you could still probably do pretty straight. You could do Born Again straight.
I suppose I'm just thinking, it wouldn't look like the 80s or whatever, but
That's fair. Yeah. I mean, some of the clothing choices would be different, and you wouldn't have Nuke be Vietnam, but
Jessica Jones was like what? Two stories, right?
Jessica Jones is basically two big runs. Yeah.
That's what I'm saying, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there's other stuff with that character, but as far as her being the lead, there's only like two things.
Steve, thanks so much for doing this with me, man.
Yeah. Thanks for asking me. This was fun.
Yeah, this was really fun, and it went so fast. And I think that this is maybe the easiest. Oh, Remeder Jr. and Senior were both credited at the end. That's really cool.
Yeah. They credit a lot of random Daredevil creators throughout the show's run, so that's cool.
I think this would be. I don't know that. I don't want to commit to it. I don't know that Steve and I will have time to go in and do all these, especially very quickly. But I think this would be so easy to go through and constantly have plenty of material to discuss, Steve.
Oh, definitely. It's like you said, there's a reason each episode's broken up, and so you can get a lot of unique discussion just out of the individual episodes. Especially when we get to the later stuff. Like I love Speak No Evil. That episode's fantastic. And Path of the Righteous is brilliant as well.
Well, everybody, thanks as always for listening to Bat Chat. I mean, Daredevil Discourse.
Daredevil Discourse. That's the perfect title for this. Did you just come up with that?
I just came up with that.
That's fantastic.
Thanks a lot for listening. And Steve, if I'm right about this, tell me if I'm wrong and you change your mind, Steve. But Steve is planning on doing a quick reaction video after he finishes the 13-episode run of Daredevil season 2 this weekend.
Yeah, I've already canceled basically everything I'm doing on Friday to watch everything from 3 a.m. to whenever long it takes to finish.
So he will have a video up basically as fast as anyone could humanly possibly do it, as long as his internet allows him to get it uploaded right away. And then
the only variable is time it takes to edit the video and post it.
Precisely. And then 2 weeks after that, we will have our spoiler cast on that Sunday night. So everybody look forward to all of that. And there probably will be some other Daredevil things on the channel in the near future. I don't want to promise anything yet, but there's a couple things that we're talking about. So anyway, lots of fun things to come. Steve, appreciate you, buddy. Thanks a lot, man.
Oh, thanks for having me, Cap. This was great.
Thanks a lot for listening once again, folks. I am Captain Logan.
I'm Steve Baxley.
Hope you enjoyed it. Thanks again.